few weeks ago on the podcast, I talked about a televangelist named Jim Bakker, and unbeknownst to me at the time, I may have unexpectedly gotten myself into a little bit of trouble with God. So here's what I said about Jim Bakker specifically. In a discussion on his show, Jim Bakker, another prosperity preacher, was talking about how Christians would respond if Donald Trump got impeached. And the clip was insane. It speaks for itself.
Jim Clement, before he died, he prophesied they will be screaming impeachment, impeachment, but it will not happen. That's true.
If it happens, there will be a civil war in the United States of America.
So is that a threat? Are you trying to incite violence on your show? Are you trying to encourage all of your Christian viewers to take up arms if Donald Trump is impeached? Is that what you're doing? Because it seems like it, and really Christians should be the last people in favor of a civil war, because if you're truly a Christian, then you should believe in Jesus's message, which is, turn the other cheek. So, hypothetically speaking, if I wanted to slap Jim Bakker across the face, then as a Christian, he should turn the other cheek and allow me to slap him again. Now, Jim Bakker has a message for haters like myself, or more specifically, God has a message that he's delivering through Jim Bakker for haters such as myself.
I'm so sick of people saying, well, that prophecy didn't come true. I got 31 things from God.
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago now?
You got it in 1999. You delivered it 1999, New Year's Eve, going into 2000.
Mm-hmm. And you know,
I keep a copy of it.
And the people almost fell out when I gave it.
Yeah.
They were overwhelmed when I gave it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, 9/11 was in this.
Right. It didn't seem possible.
And a year and a half it took before that happened.
That's right.
But here's the thing. Rick Joyner told me this, and listen to me. Church, listen. When God says something to you, you don't always know the exact time it's going to happen. And stop beating up the prophets, because God says, woe unto you when you beat up on the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
God is speaking to his people. If you take time to read this book, you'd realize that everybody in this book talked with God. Even Satan and donkeys talk to God.
Right. That's right.
That's right.
The only ones that probably aren't talking to God these days are some mean people in America. And people who just are anti-Christ.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to hear it, just shut me off. Especially you folks that monitor me every day to try to destroy me. Just go away. You don't have to be there. You don't have to hear it. But one day you're going to shake your fist in God's face. And you're going to say, God, why didn't you warn me? And he's going to say, you sat there and you made fun of Jim Bakker all those years. I warned you, but you didn't listen.
So he is angry that people are making fun of him because he continues to come out with these prophecies that are proven wrong, and I made fun of him for prophesizing that Christians would take up arms against the rest of the country if Donald Trump was impeached, so presumably I'm looped in to God's wrath there. And I'll read his quote again. One day you're going to shake your fist in God's face and say, God, why didn't you warn me? And he's going to say, you sat there and you made fun of Jim Bakker all those years. I warned you, but you didn't listen. Imagine feeling so important that you think God, the all-knowing, all-powerful being that created the universe, would come to your defense. Imagine being that narcissistic, right? Well, look, if God exists, which there's no scientific evidence to prove that he does exist, but if he does exist, that's not how that conversation would go. I would imagine it would go something like this. When you get to heaven, Jim, God is going to ask you, well, Jim, I'm wondering why you didn't read Matthew 19:24, which says, I would tell you, again, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. Now, seeing that your net worth is $600,000, I think by most ordinary American standards who don't even have $500 in the bank account, that would make you rich. So if you're rich, how do you expect to get into heaven? I mean, that same book that you held up, that was a verse I picked out from that book. So what are you going to say to God, Jim Bakker, when you get to heaven, if it exists, which it probably doesn't? It most certainly doesn't because there's no evidence for it. But what are you going to say to God, Jim? Even though, normal, rational thinking people like myself and my viewers will watch Jim Bakker and they'll think, man, this guy is crazy. The problem is that there's still a lot of people that think what he's saying is the truth, when really he's a fraud. He is taking advantage of all of his listeners and watchers. He's exploiting them. He's using religion to exploit them for his right-wing agenda and to make himself rich. So, Jim Bakker, I think that the only person that is going to have to answer to God, if God does exist, is going to be you. So, I hate to break it to you, Jim, but if God does exist, he doesn't care about you. There are bigger issues that God is probably concerned about right now. Not to mention, all the issues we have on Earth. But I mean, if there are other planets out there, I'm sure that they're facing a lot worse issues than we're facing here. I mean, I'm sure there's some civilizations that God created that, they are orbiting a dying star. So God is trying to save them, save an entire species from going extinct. So he's probably worried about those issues and not people who poke fun at you, which it's warranted. You make it easy.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.